When he was singing, it was not permitted to leave the theatre even for the most pressing of reasons. Thus it is alleged that women gave birth during his shows, and many who were tired of listening and applauding when the entrance gates were closed either jumped furtively off the wall or else pretended to be dead and were carried out for burial.
Nero's thin, husky voice would be heard on the stages of Naples, Greece and Rome, but whatever the audience felt about his performances, his compositions were always met with applause.
He had some young men who were called equites, and these followed him around and applauded him, and then one day he was told that in Alexandria there was a tradition of actually training people to clap, and he thought this was a wonderful idea, so he had his clap trained to do this, but apparently he was so pleased with the effect that he couldn't pass it up.
While Nero's performances exposed him to public ridicule, his private behavior was becoming increasingly salacious.
He prostituted his own body to such a degree that when virtually every part of his body had been employed in filthy lusts, he devised a new and unprecedented practice as a kind of game, in which, disguised in the pelt of a wild animal, he would rush out of a den and attack the private parts of men and women who had been attached to stakes.
It was becoming clear that Nero's appetite for self-indulgence was out of control. The emperor was turning into a monster.
As a ruler, the most serious things he does is to exploit the empire and to take its resources for his own purposes, and by doing so to actually endanger the safety and security of his subjects.
In 60 AD, on the edge of the empire, in a place called Britain, Roman tax collectors brutally robbed the queen of a local tribe. She was flogged and her daughters were raped. It was a big mistake. Queen Boadicea incited her people, the Iceni, to revolt. In a lightning campaign across southern Britain, they destroyed Colchester, London and St. Albans, killing the Roman inhabitants. In Rome, Nero panicked and made plans to evacuate the island forever. But his generals were prepared to stand firm and fight for the Roman Empire. The first great battle of Britain took place at an unknown location in central England. The 10,000 legionnaires of General Paulinus made a desperate stand against an enemy that outnumbered them more than 20 to 1. Against all odds, the legionnaires carried the day. Boadicea poisoned herself. Nero's empire was safe. For now. In Rome, Nero's behavior was becoming even more cruel and more eccentric. In AD 62, he had his first wife Octavia murdered so he could marry his mistress Poppaea. Nero would later kick the pregnant Poppaea to death when she scolded him for coming home late after a chariot race. It was a murderous act that Nero deeply regretted. In a fit of remorse, he took a boy called Sporus who reminded him of Poppaea. The boy was castrated, dressed, and made up to look like the dead empress, and married to Nero in an extravagant ceremony. In AD 64, a great fire ravaged the center of Rome for 6 days. It was the biggest urban fire the ancient world had seen, and would not be equaled in its destruction until the fires of Dresden in the Second World War. Nero was away from Rome at the time. It's unlikely that he fiddled while his city burned, but many believed the emperor had started the fire.
Nobody dared fight the flames. Attempts to do so were prevented by menacing gangs. Torches too were openly thrown in by men crying that they acted on orders.
The great Roman fire left hundreds of thousands destitute, and the Roman economy in such a crisis that the currency had to be devalued. One man alone seemed to benefit from the carnage.
The fact was, a lot of land became available because a lot of houses were burned down. And the emperor took advantage of this in order to build this palace. And he started building it in various quarters of the city simultaneously. So the impression that he was taking over the city and also the sufferings of the individuals who lost their property created a very bad impression.
Nero cleared an area the size of London's Hyde Park in the centre of Rome. Here he built a new, sprawling palace complex called the Golden House, after the plates of gold which were said to cover its ceilings and walls. It contained an enormous lake and expansive grounds, which were populated with all manner of exotic animals.
The banqueting halls had coffered ceilings fitted with panels of ivory, which would revolve, scattering flowers and pipes, which would spray perfume on those beneath. The principal banqueting chamber had a dome, which revolved continuously both day and night, like the world itself. When the house was brought to completion in this style, and he dedicated it, he said nothing more to indicate his approval than to declare he had at last begun to live like a human being.
It is, as it were, Nero's great statement in the city of Rome, and remember that in front of it, at its gate, is this enormous, colossal statue of the sun, but with the features of the emperor. The purpose of the Golden Palace? To laud and praise the name of the great man. It becomes yet one further reason to condemn him after his fall.